After this guide, I promise I will make you understand and remember intuitively how the Herta skit works. So let's get to it. The main thing we want to do with the Herta is get stacked interpretation. And the max stacked interpretation is 42. But alright then, why do I want to have stacked interpretation to begin with? Well, that is to make sure that your enhanced skill does more damage basically. So more enhanced skill damage. That's the reason why we want to have stacked interpretation. Alright? And then the first question to your mind is, well, how do I get this enhanced skill then? To begin with, well, enhanced skill becomes available when you cast your ultimate. So when you cast your ultimate, your enhanced skill will become available. And that is this thing right here. So when you have one of this, that means your enhanced skill is available. And this stack right here is called inspiration. When you have an inspiration stack, that means your enhanced skill is available. And the max inspiration stacks you can have is 4. Max 4 stacks, but you will never get to that point apart from the Diverge universe or Simulated universe. In the normal runs in the end game, you mostly will have just 1 inspiration stack always. And a nice thing that the ult also does is it gives you 100% advance forward to the Herta. Alright? And of course, +1 inspiration stack. Alright, if I cast my ult, my enhanced skill becomes available. Why do I want to have my enhanced skill? Well, so I can do a lot of damage when I cast it. And the more stacked interpretation I have, the more damage my enhanced skill will do. But how is that damage then distributed of that interpretation stacks? Well, the distribution is like this basically. So let's assume we have 5 enemies on the field. Alright, let's annotate them with red dots. And let's say this enemy right here has the most interpretation stacks on the field, annotated with the blue dot. When I cast my enhanced skill, depending on how many stacks the focused enemy has, the more damage that enhanced skill will do to the focused enemy and to the other allies on the field. But the thing is, the focused enemy will get the most damage from that enhanced skill. But all the damage done to the other enemies is dependent on how many stacks the focused enemy had to begin with. So the more stacks the focused enemy had, the more damage he will get. So he will get the most damage. Then the other enemies on the field will also get more damage, but less damage. So basically, you want to cast your enhanced skill on enemies with the most interpretation stacks. And in the best case scenario, you want to attack enemies with max interpretation stacks, so 42. Well, why do I want to do that? That is because when you attack enemies with max stacks, with your enhanced skill, that means that enhanced skill will basically do more ice damage. That is what it comes down to. So basically you want to cast your enhanced skill on enemies with maxed interpretation stacks, so you get that ice damage boost for that attack only then. So that means your target will get a lot of damage because he has the most stacks, and the other enemies on the field will also get a lot of damage, but a bit less damage. But still, that damage on the other enemies is dependent on how many stacks the main enemy had. And since the enemy had 42 stacks, that means the other enemies will also get quite a lot of damage. So alright, now we know why we want to have stacked interpretation stacks. The first question that may come to your mind is now, how do I get these interpretation stacks to begin with? Well, that is when you inflict interpretation. So if you inflict interpretation, then you can work towards getting stacked interpretation. That makes obviously sense. So how do I inflict interpretation on enemies then? Well, there are quite many ways. So let's start with the first way, and that is when enemies enter the battle. So when enemies enter the battle, they all will get 1 interpretation stack. As easy as that. And the other way to inflict interpretation is, which luckily also happens automatically, is when a wave starts. So every time at the start of a wave, 1 random enemy will get 25 interpretation stacks. Like I said, 1 random enemy. So let's say we have a situation like this with 5 enemies on the field. And let's say there is 1 elite enemy. So a big red dot. That's the elite enemy. Or a boss enemy. So basically a bigger enemy. This plus 25 interpretation stacks will only go to 1 enemy. Just like I said. But it will prioritize big enemies. So elite enemies. But if there was no elite enemy and only small enemies, or if there were 2 elite enemies or 3 elite enemies, then it will be random. So if there was no elite enemy, then these 25 stacks would go onto 1 random small enemy. But if there were 2 elite enemies, then it would also choose 1 of them randomly. Well, what is another way we can inflict interpretation stacks to get these stacked interpretation stacks? Well, that is when we kill an enemy with interpretation stacks on them. So let's say enemy dead. Also when they leave the battle, but for now we can say on enemy dead to keep it simple. So on enemy dead, or when the enemy leaves the battle, then the interpretation stacks will be transferred to a random enemy. Well, how many interpretation stacks will get transferred? That depends on how many they had to begin with. And this is a plus, by the way. Well, it works just like with the start wave one. It will prioritize big enemies, so elite enemies or higher. If there are 2 elite enemies or no elite enemies and only small enemies, then it will just choose randomly. But the funny thing is with the start wave and enter wave is they both happen at the same time. So when you enter a battle, a wave starts and enemies enter the battle. So enemies at the start of a battle will always have 1 interpretation stack at least, and one of them will have the extra 25 interpretation stacks on top of that. And what is the last way that we can inflict interpretation stacks? And that is when an ally attacks. So when an ally attacks, we will also inflict interpretation stacks. But how much? Regardless of whether there is an extra erudition character in your team or not, it will be always +1. So for each attacked enemy, they will get +1 stack of interpretation always. Just like this. So what happens is when an ally of yours attacks, when you have 2 or more erudition characters in your team, is this. So an ally of your attack, you have 2 or more erudition characters in your team. What happens is this. The highest stacks enemy will get 1 extra interpretation stacks basically. So if we say this enemy here has the most interpretation stacks compared to all the other ones, then that enemy will get this +1 extra interpretation stack. But do mind, it is of all the attacked enemies. So if I had just attacked these 2 enemies, then which of those 2 has the highest interpretation stacks? Well, if I just zoom in a little bit, this one has a bit more. So the highest interpretation stacks in this case would be him. So he would get 1 extra interpretation stacks. So he would get 2 in total. 1 from this one and 1 from this one. All right? But if the ally that attacks is also an erudition character and you have 2 or more erudition characters in your team, then that attacking erudition character will inflict 2 extra interpretation stacks on top of this +1. So 3 interpretation stacks will go onto the enemy with the highest amount of interpretation stacks of all the attacked enemies. And in this case, that would be this enemy since he has the most of all of these attacked enemies. So he will get +2 from this one, +1 from this, +1 just because he got attacked. So that means if an erudition character attacks, then all the other enemies will get +1 normally, but this enemy with the highest amount of interpretation stacks would get +4 in total. Just because the attacking ally is an erudition character with 2 or more erudition characters in your team, that means stacking up those interpretation stacks is way easier that way. But the nice thing with having 2 or more erudition characters in your team is also this one. You just get for free, the whole team, 80% crit damage. Just for free by having 2 erudition characters in your team. With the Herta, of course. So the Herta with the small Herta, Himeko, Jade, whoever you got. Just for free, you will have this. But there is also another thing. When you have 2 or more erudition characters in your team, and that is that the damage per stack done with this damage distribution is way more. So basically, your enhanced skill will do a lot of more damage. That's all you need to know. And there's also another benefit by having 2 or more erudition characters in your team, and that is this. Your Herta will gain way more energy easier for her ult. To understand this, we need to know this. When an ally of yours attacks, the Herta will get +3 energy per attacked enemy. So let's say we have 5 enemies on the field. We attack all of them. That means the Herta will get, for each attacked enemy, +3 energy for free. But where does having 2 or more erudition characters come into play? That is this. If you had just attacked 1 enemy, then it would have been counted as for having attacked 3 enemies. So it starts the calculation from 3 enemies. And of course, if I attack 4 enemies, then I will of course get this extra energy too. But by having 2 or more erudition characters in your team, if you just attack 1 enemy, then the Herta will always get 9 energy for free. Because it will always count as having attacked 3 enemies, regarding energy then. So basically, having 2 or more erudition characters in your team makes the Herta way more OP. That's what it basically comes down to. And of course, if your energy is maxed, that means you can now cast your ultimate. And because Herta gets free energy basically by attacking enemies. That makes getting her ult up is also a bit easier. Alright, now we have come this far. We know many ways to inflict interpretation onto the enemies, but there is also one other way to inflict interpretation, and that is only special to the Herta skill. Since when you cast the Herta skill, regardless of whether it's the enhanced one or the normal one, so we cast Herta skill, and of course specifically the Herta. The thing that's unique to the Herta skill is that it will apply one stack of interpretation on the focused enemy. So plus one interpretation stack when you cast the Herta skill. But the thing with the Herta's enhanced skill is this though. When you cast the Herta's enhanced skill, it will first reset the targeted enemy's interpretation stacks to 1. Bam. So the focused enemy will get his stacks reset to 1. And that's the only way to reset an enemy's stacks. And then, of course, after having reset to 1, you will immediately gain +1. So the enemy will have 2. And then, because we have also attacked that enemy, we will get +1 from this. So when you cast your enhanced skill on an enemy, you will most likely end up with 3 stacks after that attack. And of course, when you cast your enhanced skill, that means that you will lose 1 inspiration stack. So -1 inspiration stack. But the thing I want to quickly let you know is how the Herta skill works. It basically works like this. So we got our normal skill 2. So let's say we have 5 enemies on the field and I focus this enemy in the middle. Then every enemy on the field will get damaged. Alright? Because the Herta skill works a bit different than normal characters. Because it is like one target, then it does this like repeating attacks. But all you need to know is this. If I attack the one in the middle, everyone will get hit basically because there can be only 5 enemies on the field now. But if I had, let's say for example, focused the enemy on the right, then the enemy on the very left would have not been attacked. Then this slider would go like this. So if I want to damage everyone on the field with our normal skill then I want to attack the enemy on the middle. That's basically. But of course, if the enemy on the right is the enemy you want to stack up your interpretation stacks, of course, then this enemy here wouldn't be damaged by the normal skill. But luckily, for the enhanced skill though, there is a nice thing, and that is that it also does all of this, but it also does an AoE attack at the end. And of course, the same attack that enhanced skill does does a bit more damage. It also ends up with an AoE attack basically. So all enemies would have been hit with the enhanced skill basically. Pretty nice. That is all you need to know regarding how Herta skill works. You want to attack everyone, target the enemy in the middle, but of course it depends. If the enemy on the middle is not the enemy that needs to get the interpretation stacks, then of course, then this enemy here wouldn't be attacked by the normal skill. But luckily, the enhanced skill ends up with an AoE attack in the end, so he would get hit, luckily. Voila. So basically, casting Herta skill gives you 1 free interpretation stack. That is all you need to remember from this. That casting your enhanced skill resets the locked on target's interpretation stacks to 1. But there is also one pretty interesting thing, and that is that whenever you inflict interpretation stacks on enemies, you will get a stack from something. And that thing is called answer up. So whenever you inflict interpretation stacks, you will get answer up. And answer up is this thing right here beneath Herta's HP bar. And you can have max 99 of it. So 99 max. Well, alright, how much of this answer up do I get whenever I inflict interpretation stack? Well, for every interpretation stack you inflict, you will gain 1 answer up stack. And this answer up stack cannot be lost. It is basically locked. So if you got 99, you will always have 99. Alright, so why do I want to have this answer up stacks? What's the purpose of it? Well, the nice thing is, it gives you, for every stack of answer up you have, plus 1% of ultimate damage, which is pretty nice. So 99% ultimate damage you will get in the end. And you will keep it that the whole battle if you got to 99. So increase ult damage. And luckily there are many ways to inflict interpretation. So getting up these stacks is quite easy, since at the start of battle, every enemy gets already 1 for free. And at the start of every wave, 1 enemy gets 25. And the nice thing is though, if an enemy has already 42 stacks and you haven't maxed up your answer up stacks yet, if I attack this enemy with max inspiration stacks, and I don't reset with the Herta's enhanced skill or anything, so it basically overcaps, it still counts as an extra interpretation stack for the Herta's answer up stacks. So if I attack this enemy with 42 stacks, the interpretation stacks itself won't change, of course, but it will still count as +1 applied interpretation stacks for the answer up. Getting up this to 99 is pretty easy, luckily. And there is one last thing that we need to discuss, and that is that when you cast the Herta's ult, yes, you get 100% action forward and an inspiration stack to be able to cast your enhanced skill, but it also rearranges the stacks on all enemies. And how does that work? It works like this. So let's say we have 3 enemies on the field and 1 big elite enemy or boss, whatever. When I cast my ult, the interpretation stacks will be shuffled, but the highest amount of interpretation stacks would be transferred to an elite or higher enemy. So let's say this small enemy has a lot of interpretation stacks because the elite enemy entered the battle later or something, and this small enemy has a little bit, and the boss also has a little bit. So what the ult does is, it rearranges the interpretation stacks. So, prioritizing elite enemies or higher, it would go like this. The highest amount of stacks will go to him, the small stacks will go to Wu now. Well, it will get shuffled, so it may go to him, or it may go to him, and then this would go to him. But the one thing that you need to know is, basically, the big enemy will get the highest amount of stacks if he didn't have it already. That's all you need to know from this ultimate. And yeah, does it count as getting your stacked interpretation stacks? I'd say yes, kinda. It doesn't actually give any stacks itself, the ultimate. Of course, it gives stacks because it's an attack. It doesn't inflict any interpretation stacks itself. But still, it allows you to get the stacked interpretation on the enemy you want to get it. And that is the big boss enemy. So I'd still just put it here just for you to understand a bit better. And regarding the Herta's technique, it's quite simple. It basically gives the Herta attack bonus when you use it. It's a passive skill. It marks 3 chests on the map, so easier to find your chest. And in the simulated universe or Divergent universe, it does a lot of damage to the enemies when you enter the battle. So like a 30% to elite enemies or higher, and 99% to small enemies. So nothing really complicated or anything, luckily. So if you have followed along, now you should basically intuitively understand how the Herta's kit works. So to recap, it works like this. With the Herta, you want to have stacked interpretation stacks. Alright, why do I want to have stacked interpretation stacks? So that my enhanced skill does more damage. If the enemy had max stacks, then I would do more damage because I would get ice damage bonus for that attack. Alright, how do I get those stacked interpretation stacks to begin with? Well, I need to inflict them. How do I inflict them? Well, many ways, as you can see. So when an enemy enters battle, +1. When a wave starts, one enemy will get 25. It will prioritize elite enemies or higher. If not, randomized. If an enemy dies, it will transfer its stacks to an enemy. And other way is when an ally of yours attacks. So if my ally attacks, the attacked enemy will get +1 interpretation stack. But if I had 2 or more erudition characters in my team, then the enemy with the highest amount of interpretation stacks would get +1. But if that ally that's attacking now is also an erudition character, while having 2 or more erudition characters in my team, then it would also inflict 2 additional interpretation stacks on the enemy with the highest interpretation stack. So 3 in total to the highest interpretation stacked enemy. But the special thing with Herta is her skill also gives 1 interpretation stack on the focused enemy, regardless of whether it's the normal skill or the enhanced skill. But the special thing about the special skill is, so the enhanced skill, that it first resets the interpretation stacks on the focused enemy to 1. Alright? But how do I get this special enhanced skill to begin with? Well, that is when you cast your ultimate. So when you cast your ultimate, you get 100% advance forward, 1 stack of this inspiration. So this thing right here, which you can hold max 4 of, but in normal battles, you will always have 1. Alright? And of course, when you cast your enhanced skill, you will lose that inspiration stack. Well, that means I need to cast my ultimate a lot of times, so my enhanced skill is available, right? Yes, luckily, with the Herta's kit, whenever you attack an enemy, you will get +3 energy for each attacked enemy. But if you have 2 or more erudition characters in your team, that means this hit enemy calculation will start from 3. So if I hit just 1 enemy, it will still count regarding energy-wise as if having hit 3 enemies. So I will get 9 energy always. But of course, if I hit 4 or 5 enemies, then I would get these 3 extra energy for each enemy hit too, of course. And by having 2 or more erudition characters in your team, I will also just freely get 80% crit damage to the whole team, and my enhanced skill will do a lot more damage to all the enemies. And another special thing is that when I cast Herta's ult, yes, I get these nice things, but it also rearranges the interpretation stacks on the enemies. So basically, the enemy with the highest amount of interpretation stacks will get transferred to the elite enemy or higher if he did not have it to begin with. And that is basically the whole flow of the Herta's kit. So now let's go through an example of when I cast the Herta's ultimate, just so we have a real understanding of why it works the way it works. So let's say we cast Herta's ult. All right, and let's say we have a normal enemy, an elite enemy, another elite enemy, and another normal enemy. And let's say this one has 4 interpretation stacks, this one has 5, this one is already maxed, and this one has 7 stacks. I now cast my Herta's ult. What happens now? Well, as we know, it first will rearrange the interpretation stacks, prioritizing the highest stacks to elite enemies or higher. So, if you have a look at these enemies, well, this one has already max stacks, so nothing will happen to him. Other elite enemy has 5 stacks. But if we look, we see that the normal enemy has 7 stacks. What does that mean? Well, this interpretation stacks will go to the elite enemy. And this elite enemy's his stacks will go away. So he now has 7. Well, what will happen to this 5? Well, it is now random. Will he go to this normal enemy or to this normal enemy? Let's say he will go to this normal enemy and this 4 stacks going to this normal enemy. Voila. This is the rearranging phase. But for better understanding, let's show it like this. It went from this to this. Alright? But now the ultimate needs to hit, of course. So what is Herta's ultimate? It's an attack. So we go to ally attacks. Do we have 2 or more erudition characters in our team? Let's say for this example, yes, we do. So we have a server in our team. So the Herta's ult is cast. We have 2 or more erudition characters in our team, and the Herta herself is an erudition character. So that means we will be inflicting 2 extra stacks to the highest stacks enemy. And of course, +1 because we have 2 or more erudition characters in our team. So we'll be already getting +3 stacks to the enemy with the most stacks. And who is that? Well, that is this enemy. But what I found out is, if an enemy has already max stacks, it will give those stacks to the other enemy with the highest stacks. And that is this enemy. So you will get +3 stacks from this attack now. But this attack is also an ally attack, of course. So each enemy will get +1 by default because it's an AoE ult. So +1 from that too. And that's it basically from the Herta's ult. Nothing more. And of course we get energy and all that stuff. But regarding interpretation stacks, that's it. So what do we end up with? 6, 11, till 42 and 5. And luckily, even though this enemy did not get an extra interpretation stack, it still counts towards the answer up stacks. So getting that increased ult damage is easy. And that's the whole flow of the Herta basically. As easy as that. And of course, when you look at her kit the first time with all the text, it gets a bit confusing. So if there is anything I just said which doesn't make sense, just let me know. I thank you for paying attention and see you the next time. Bye.